Okay, shall we start?
Sure.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to our PMI webinar. My name is Dr. Hassan Taib, the Executive Director of the Western and Southern Region PMI KSA chapter. While we are excited to have all of you with us, we would like to extend a special welcome to our guest of honor, Mr. Mark Lyons, the Vice President, Disciplined Agile Project Management Group at the Project Management Institute. He is the co-creator of Disciplined Agile Toolkit with Scott Ampler and co-author of several books in Disciplined Agile as well. Mark has over than 25 years of experience helping organizations around the world to be successful with project delivery using Agile, Lean, traditional, and hybrid approaches. He has a record of successfully transforming entire organization to business agility so they can rapidly and continuously deliver value to their customers and other stakeholders. And for today, as you may all be aware, we're going to have a discussion on Disciplined Agile, past, present, and future, the path to true business agility. Usually in any organization, we're using a variety of approaches to deliver solutions to our stakeholders, whether it's waterfall, agile, or hybrid approach. This webinar explains agile approaches and the value of using Disciplined Agile Toolkit and how to use it in practice to accelerate the journey of project delivery success using a guided continuous improvement technique. Mr. Mark Lyons, welcome again, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Doctor, and thank you everyone for attending. I really appreciate it. I'm speaking to you from my home in Calgary, Canada. If you don't know Canadian geography, the Rocky Mountains run north-south on the western side of the country, and Calgary is 1 hour drive east of it. So very unpredictable weather. I was saying that we've actually had snow in the last couple of days. Now, the good news is it will melt. It gets cold, it gets hot, it gets cold, it gets hot. Right now it's cold. Anyway, thank you for having me. Let's get into Disciplined Agile. So I'm going to talk about what is Disciplined Agile, how can it help us. Disciplined Agile, the scope of Disciplined Agile is business agility, and one aspect of it is Disciplined Agile delivery. And I'm going to take a deeper dive into what that's all about. I'll also talk about how we can use it to help produce business value. And I'm also going to give you some insights on where we're going with Disciplined Agile within PMI. So first of all, what is Disciplined Agile? I'll take you on the journey of how we got to be joining the PMI family. Back in 2009, my co-creator and co-author, Scott Ambler, was the chief methodologist for IBM worldwide for Agile and Lean. And Scott also lives in Canada, albeit on the other side of the country, about a 4-hour flight east of where I live. But we had known each other for some time and spoke at the same conferences and things. And so Scott, while he was at IBM, he realized that we needed, as chief methodologist, he realized that we needed a more robust Agile than Scrum. Agile, if you don't know, is described by a 19-page Scrum guide, a 19-page body of knowledge. And clearly 19 pages isn't enough guidance to help us be successful on initiatives. But what is in Scrum is amazing. It is very, very good guidance, but it's just not enough. And that is by design. The creators of Scrum did not intend to teach us different ways of doing requirements, different ways of estimating, different ways of planning, different ways of testing and architecture and things. But they gave us this lovely kernel of process and said, you folks figure out the rest on your own. And some companies did, some teams do well at that, but many organizations struggle, and because there's just not enough guidance there, and as a result, their initiatives may fail, and Agile is often blamed. And it's not Agile's fault per se. The fault is that we just didn't have enough education about how to make Agile work in different kinds of situations. So Scott recognized this, and IBM, working with all kinds of companies, large and small, recognized that we needed a more robust Agile. and thus came up with something called Disciplined Agile Delivery. And Scott asked me to write a book on it around 2010. Took us 2 years, and it came out in 2012. And that was the first book on Disciplined Agile Delivery. If you've seen it, it's a big book, and it's got a sailing boat on the front of it. And as they say, the rest is history. That started us off on our journey. And so then Scott left IBM, and we started a consulting company and started to enrich Disciplined Agile. In 2014, we grew the scope to include Disciplined DevOps, and where Disciplined Agile Delivery is focused on delivering functionality by high performance teams. That I often say, what good is it if I'm building an application, a software application, or implementing a package like SAP or something? What good is it if I can implement a feature every day if I can only actually ship it once a quarter? Clearly, that's not agile. So DevOps is about bringing together the building of something with the deployment and supporting of it on a much more frequent basis. And so we've layered in some enterprise guidance for what it means for DevOps to run in an organization. I'll tell you more about that a bit later. 2015, we expanded the scope to include all aspects of IT, including lean governance, PMOs, product management, program management, portfolio management. 2017, we expanded it to the entire enterprise. So now we provide functional guidance for how to be agile in non-IT areas, functional areas in your organization. For instance, marketing, enterprise architecture, sales, legal, and those kind of finance as an example. So this is the scope of DA, and I'll show you more about that in a few minutes. 2019, last August, we joined the PMI family. So Disciplined Agile was acquired, and Scott and I are so thrilled to now be part of PMI. PMI has always been respected for world-class guidance on all things project management. It's got a credible certification program, a lifelong learning journey, if you will, with a number of certifications, supporting community with chapters and those kinds of things, and continuous learning events. So it really is the place to go to be successful in your career. So world-class project management guidance and a not-for-profit. On the Disciplined Agile side, what Scott and I have always talked about is pragmatic, agnostic agile. So regardless of what method or framework you use, our value proposition is that you can get better at whatever you do using agile, regardless of what method or framework you use. So we're agnostic. And this agnosticism fits in so nicely with PMI that now PMI has the best of both worlds. We have traditional guidance, we have agile guidance, and we have hybrid guidance. In fact, just about this time last year, I spoke at the Project Management International Conference in Dubai, and the topic I talked about was hybrid, where you mix a mixture of traditional approaches and agile approaches together. That can absolutely be done. And 2020, what we've been doing is we also, when I say we, I'm talking about PMI, we acquired Flex. Now Flex is a set of techniques developed by a gentleman named Al Shalloway in his company Net Objectives. And Net Objectives was acquired by PMI. And what Flex does is a lot of companies, when they're doing agile in large scale situations, that is to say, if they have 100, 200, 300 developers working together to produce some kind of solution, perhaps you're replatforming a mainframe insurance system to more modern technologies, and it's very, very large, and you need several hundred developers to do this. Well, how do you do it using Agile? The most common approach is to use a framework called SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework is what it stands for, which is a good technique if you're in that large scale situation. But what we see out there is a lot of companies struggle with it to actually deliver value quick enough to be truly agile. So what Flex does is it provides guidance for large scale agile situations to actually be much more effective. So it helps you improve your SAFe is the bottom line if you're using that framework. So a definition of Disciplined Agile, it's a toolkit that provides straightforward guidance that enables us to make better decisions inside our organizations about our way of working. It's really important, folks, that you understand that Disciplined Agile is not another method. It's not another framework. It's a toolkit. It's full of practices and strategies. As an example, Agile teaches us about essentially one way of doing requirements, and that is something called user stories, which is 1 or 2 sentences and a few to describe the feature, and a number of sentences to describe how we would test it. It's called acceptance criteria. And you can fit that on one piece of A4 paper. And what we would suggest to you is that in many cases, that's all you need. Because you could, in simple situations, if you have the business representative sitting beside you, we call them a product owner, imagine side by side with me and we build the application together. And she tells me exactly how she wants it to look, the colors, and what's in the different data entry fields and things. You could actually, so this is an Agile mindset idea, is that we rely more on conversations than we do on written requirements. So that's nice, but that only works in very simplistic situations. If you're building a bank, go back to the banking example, a banking application, you need to lot more than just conversations to get by with your requirements. So if Agile only teaches us about this one requirements technique, and I know I need to supplement those stories with something else, what do I do? Well, in the Disciplined Agile Toolkit, we actually have something like 44 different requirements techniques. Some are textural, some are diagrammatic, pictorial, if you will. And this teaching you those different techniques is going to allow you to become much more effective, because you can say, okay, I've got my user stories, but maybe I could also use something called personas. Maybe I could do a diagrammatic technique to show the screen navigational flow using something called storyboards and draw those on a whiteboard. You get the idea. A lot of people are not effective at Agile because they don't know about these other techniques. So the Disciplined Agile Toolkit is the only thing in existence like this. There is nothing out there like it. Scott and I have read the 100 books, and we pulled together the techniques and organized them into requirements techniques and testing techniques and architecture techniques and estimating, planning, all sorts of different techniques to help you be more effective. That essentially is what the toolkit is. And you can use that toolkit on Scrum, on SAFe, on Less, on Spotify, in traditional approaches, in hybrid approaches. That's essentially what it is. We used to call it a process decision framework because it helps you make better process decisions. But as soon as we used the word framework, then people thought that it was Scrum or DAD. It was SAFe or DAD, and that was absolutely the wrong message. So we've changed we don't call it a framework anymore. We call it a toolkit. It makes much more sense that way. So here you see this idea. On here is something like 50 different practices that you might use to help you be more effective. And our CEO, Sunil Prashara, when he learned about DA, he says, you know what, I think of DA as an umbrella over all of Agile. Methods will come and go, and always have, but the underlying practices remain. And how you assemble those practices is what makes up a method. So we are kind of above the fray of the different methods, a set of techniques. You know, here you see in this picture, Scott, myself, and Al Shalloway. One of the great things about what's going on at PMI right now is that we've really grown the thought leadership team to really become a leader, a global leader in the Agile space, which is amazing. We've always had the PMI ACP program for the Agile perspective, but it just wasn't robust enough to really get the attention of the market. And we really believe that what we have now is setting us up for an amazing future of Agile within PMI that we can share with the world. And I'll tell you more about that in this presentation. So I don't have time to go through the DA mindset I could spend a whole webinar just on this, but we've broken up the mindset into principles, promises, and guidelines. And I'm gonna highlight for you a few of my favorites. The first one is to delight customers. Everything begins and ends with customers. If we're not delighting customers, we shouldn't be doing it. So, and notice it says delight, it doesn't say satisfy. We want to go to the next level and truly delight the customers. And the way we do that is with some of these other principles, like being awesome. Being awesome means that Agile done properly, everybody is more effective. We're more productive, we produce better quality, we have lower risks, the teams are happier. And by the way, it's not just the teams, the entire organization is happier, because true business agility goes to outside of IT to all the other areas. That means those areas are more effective, they're more awesome, and everybody is happier. And one of the reasons I'm so passionate about what I do is because I've been fortunate over the years to go into organizations where they're struggling with Agile and people are unhappy. And by the time you leave, everybody's happier. The executive, middle management, the teams, the functional areas, the customers. And this is what awesomeness is all about. It's not that hard, folks. It just requires an investment in some learning and probably some coaching from people who understand how to use the toolkit. Now, we also believe that context counts. There's no one recipe for success. The way you use Agile on a simple application, or imagine you're updating your website. Well, you can get away in many cases with just simple conversation as you build your website together, and you could be much more agile than in a situation when you're building that banking application, or if you're building software for hospitals where people's lives depend on the software working properly. Well, then in that case, you do not want to take any shortcuts. You can still be agile, but the way you be agile is different than in a simple web application. So this is the beautiful thing about DA, is it's adaptable for your context. We're pragmatic. We're not purist like a lot of agile methods are. They're very prescriptive, and they say you do things this way, and it's black and white. And we would suggest to you is not black and white. It's gray. We need to think and decide which way we do agile. And just because somebody says in some method that you have to do it this way, that may not make sense for you. So we're not purist. We believe that choice is good. We provide different ways of doing agile: Scrum, Lean, traditional waterfall approaches mixed with Agile and Lean. It's nice to have choice. So choice is good. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the promises. And I'll just touch on a couple here. One is to create psychological safety, embrace diversity. Diversity is good. And psychological safety means that I'm free to make mistakes as on my journey to learning without being judged. This is the key to effective teams, is that they're not scared of trying different things, because they might get punished if they are unsuccessful in a particular iteration. So it's important to have, but if we make mistakes, that's okay, but we want to make sure that we learn from those mistakes. And I'll tell you more about that a little bit later when we talk about continuous improvement. The other one I'll talk about is, improve predictability. Agile done properly absolutely improves predictability. The one above it, make work, all work visible, is very, very important. We have a phrase out there that says no hidden work. Everybody's who is on the team, the things that they're working on should be depicted somewhere visually, either virtually or maybe on a manual workboard. These days with COVID, it's typically virtual. And then some guidelines here. I'm going to focus on the fourth one here. One I really love is to create effective environments that foster joy. And this goes back to my comments about being awesome. Good agile teams are happier. And then the next bullet talks about change the culture by improving the system. People are great. They're doing the best they can in the situation that they find themselves in, but often they're stuck in a bad culture or a bad system. So don't try to change the people to be agile. Often the problem is with the system. Change the system and people will then become more effective is the guidance there. So I'm going to move on, and I'll giving you a flavor of the mindset. Now let's talk about the scope of Disciplined Agile. At its base layer, I just took you through principles, promises, and guidelines. We also talk about basic Agile techniques, basic Lean techniques, and basic serial techniques, and so that you can pull some traditional practices if that makes sense. Different ways of structuring teams and the different kinds of roles you might have, and then guidance for how to adapt your way of working. So we consider this foundational knowledge that you can apply throughout the organization. It does not just have to be in IT. And what I'm going to take you through, though, is the what I call the square onion, because it's kind of like an onion. It's got layers, but it's square. So the first layer is definitely IT centric, because every organization has IT. And in many cases, the effectiveness of your IT really is your competitive advantage. I would point to you to some of the companies that we respect these days, and the fastest growing companies. You know, an Uber as an example. Is their core competency driving people around in cars, or is it the technology and the mobile app? I think we know the answer. UPS or FedEx couriers, is it the core competency to drive around in trucks delivering packages, or is it the logistics driven by their IT systems? And I think you would agree it's the latter. So this really is what makes companies differentiate between themselves and their competitors. So the Disciplined Agile Delivery, by the way, all these hexes here, we call them process blades. Very important to understand, this is not an organizational chart. This is not structural. This just shows you where the content is. So you double click on these and you would learn more about effective Agile strategies within these content areas, these process blades. And I'm going to take a little dive into Disciplined Agile Delivery shortly. But essentially that's our first book. That's where we talked about producing high performance Agile teams. We sometimes call them high performance engines, which is why there's a little engine on this icon. But as I said, to be effective, just building stuff every day is no good if you can't deliver frequently and support it. So that's why we need to be Agile in these supporting areas of security, data management, release management, etc. And collectively, that's what it means to be Agile, Agile Enterprise DevOps. Moving up a level, we talk about value streams. And I did some work before we joined PMI with one of the largest American pizza companies, Papa John's. And I often use them as an example, because what is a value stream? A lot of people are confused about what a value stream is. When Mark orders pizza on his phone from Papa John's, as I do, that starts, I bring up the mobile app, that starts a value stream. And I order the pizza, and then that gets transmitted off to some head office, and it gets dispatched over to a franchise, and then they have a system to receive it, and they make the pizza, and then they call a driver to deliver the pizza. And at some point, payment is taken either on my phone or when they show up at my door. The driver delivers it to me, and I track the driver on the way to my house, and then I get the pizza. So all of that is a value stream, and some of it is IT, and some of it is manual processes. So what you see here is that we need to think about the entire value stream, and we have process blades now to think about all these different things. And then at the highest level, we have Disciplined Agile for the enterprise. And now we bring in the other areas like finance and vendor management and people management, which is HR. So Google calls it people operations. We call it people management. So to be truly effective as an organization, we need to be Agile in all these areas, or as much of it as possible. In fact, the reason that a lot of Agile delivery teams fail is because the quote unquote supporting areas are not Agile themselves. So they are seen to be impediments to the team's agility. And unfortunately, in most organizations, there's no guidance. Scrum doesn't teach you how to go into portfolio management to PMOs and to help them be more effective with their Agile. Scrum doesn't teach you how to go into marketing and have much more effective marketing campaigns done in an Agile way. DA does. So this is one of the real values of Disciplined Agile, which I will talk about right now, in fact. So what are the three core value propositions of Disciplined Agile? How can it help me? The first and the most important in my mind, and it's very simple and obvious from my perspective, is that we need to invest more in learning about Agile if we expect to be effective. It's as simple as that. When you have a traditional project and you're going to build a pipeline or something, and you're spending tens of millions of dollars on it, in my experience, most executives want a PMP managing that project because they know that they know a significant body of knowledge. They've passed a difficult test, and they have thousands of hours of real world experience before they trust them with a mission critical initiative. Now you think about an organization that says, you know what, we're going to do something and we're going to use an agile approach. And the bar has been so low in the past that we've expected that somebody could do the job by attending a 2-day class where there's a guaranteed to pass test. It's 2 days, it's a tiny body of knowledge, and you don't need any experience, and yet you're called a master. And I think that this is doing a disservice to our business community, because unless they're experts on Agile, they assume that this person has an equivalent competencies of a PMP, and it simply is not true. So this is what the DA Toolkit is about. It's like, you can think of it as the PMP of Agile. There really is no other certification that compares. So you might ask, well, you know, where is it being? I haven't heard of DA before. Well, because DA was created by a tiny little Canadian company. And the only people who kind of knew about DA were the people that Scott and I actually worked with, like Papa John's, or speaking at conferences. And now all of a sudden, we have 300 chapters around the world. We have a global executive council so we have ties into the largest PMOs in the world. And we're telling this message of agnostic agile, invest in your people, learn more before you trust serious mission critical agile initiatives to a team. And this message, I can tell you folks, is really resonating. I can think about an aerospace company that I went to visit and speak at their internal project management conference. And they said to me afterwards, they said, where have you been? We've been looking for a better agile program. So here it is. So very obvious value proposition. And by the way, I think my video is on. This is the Choose Your Wow book, and it's 400 pages. Why? Because it's full of guidance on requirements and testing and architecture and estimating and all sorts of goodness. It's like the PMBOK. And very actionable advice, context-based. This really sets us apart. This is actually a rewrite of the first book on Disciplined Agile Delivery. And we decided, instead of calling it Disciplined Agile Delivery version 2 or second edition, we decided to make it a bit more sexy by calling it Choose Your Wow. And it's been branded PMIs. And if you don't know, the PDF is available free to PMI members. Just, you know, a lot of people prefer the hardcover and you get it on Amazon or something. But there it is, free PDF for members. So this essential summary to that discussion there is that an agile method typically teaches you how to fish and feed you for a day. That is to say, they teach you one way of doing things. The DA Toolkit teaches you how to fish so that you can customize an agile way of working that makes sense for you, starting with something like Scrum, but evolving it to something that makes sense for you. The second value proposition is that the toolkit enables you to extend agility beyond teams to the entire organization. So that was the square onion I showed you. We go way beyond IT to all the functional areas. So that's what real business agility is. And number 3 value proposition is, if you're in a situation where you're using this scaled agile framework called SAFE, and you have several hundred people working together in many different agile teams to deliver something, that's great. If SAFE makes sense for you, and because that's what it's built for, then use it. But as I said, many SAFE implementations struggle, and the DA Toolkit can help you be more effective with SAFE. So SAFE plus the DA Toolkit is a magical thing. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Just an example of a case study. Barclays has over 1,200 teams, not people, but 1,200 teams around the world using Disciplined Agile. I've been out to Singapore myself to speak at an internal conference for people there. So I've seen it. I've worked in the UK at Canary Wharf with them. And when you talk to the teams, though, they actually might not self-identify as Disciplined Agile. They might say, oh, no, we don't use Disciplined Agile. We do Scrum, or we do Lean, or we do Hybrid, or we do SAFE, or we do less. And that's okay. But so they're using DA without even really recognizing it, because you have to understand that every method is actually composed of practices, and those practices are in the DA Toolkit. But in addition, what John Smart is his name, John Smart, he used to be the head of transformation worldwide for Barclays, and he's the one who brought in Disciplined Agile. And he cherry picked some ideas from the toolkit that he knew he wanted to see across Barclays around the world, so that he gets some level of consistency, but yet allows people to use safe or less or Scrum or whatever makes sense for them. So this is the beauty, is that you can put in some guidance so that we get some consistency, but yet give the teams the freedom to choose their way of working. So an example is there's a role in Disciplined Agile called an architecture owner. Think of them as the technical lead, somebody who's responsible for understanding generally the technical direction for Barclays worldwide, so that we get a level of consistency around the world. So that's a role from DA, and everybody has it across Barclays. Most of them probably don't even know it comes from DA, but it's there you go. They're using the toolkit to help them be more effective. So I'm going to take a deeper dive into Disciplined Agile delivery. And rather than focusing on the bullets on this slide, I'll just tell you that for us, it's not, the world isn't just about software. The Agile Manifesto was written to talk about building working software, but it's solutions we're thinking of, which may or may not be IT. And they need to be consumable. And consumable means that, yeah, it works, it's usable, but people actually want to use it. If they don't want to use it, then we haven't done a very good job. So that's what Disciplined Agile Delivery is about, producing consumable solutions. Let's take a look inside it. If you were to double click on it. First of all, there's a set of starter life cycles, if you will. You can think of them as methods, but they're like starter recipes. I sometimes use the analogy of ingredients. Remember I talked about 44 different ways of doing requirements, documents, and pictures and things, and dozens of testing techniques and things. Think of those as ingredients inside your pantry. And a recipe might be macaroni and cheese or something, or a soup or something. But a lot of the methods, they don't use very many ingredients. So you've got this cupboard full of beautiful spices and things. What a shame. So you can start with these starter recipes that you see here, and then add different ingredients to spice it up and make it better and more effective. That's one way I've talked about Disciplined Agile Toolkit. So the Agile lifecycle is, think of it as Scrum. Underneath the covers, it's Scrum. And what that means is it's time box. It has what Scrum calls sprints, where we deliver something every couple of weeks, little mini projects. And but it's more than just Scrum. That's why we don't call it the Scrum lifecycle. There's technical techniques in there and planning and estimating and stuff that's not described by Scrum. But collectively, it's Agile, and it has time boxes. Scrum calls them sprints. We like to call them iterations, but it doesn't matter what you call them. Lean is similar, but it doesn't have these time boxes. You pull work, you flow the work as quickly as you can do it, but you're not constrained into planning 2-week mini projects. There's different approach, different philosophies. Both are good, depending on the situation. The top two are more like what we call a project-based approach, where you go through, you build a bunch of work before you actually deploy it, before you have enough functionality. That's more like a project versus a product-based approach. The continuous delivery flavors of these are more product-based. And that's why you see a little conveyor belt under these, which is, I build something, I deliver it. I build something, I deliver it. I build something, I deliver it. That's more of a product, almost like I'm releasing a new feature every couple of weeks, as an example. It's nice to have choice. Remember, choice is good and context counts. You're not locked into one approach. In the top right, we have exploratory. Think of that if you've heard of something called the lean startup, where I want to explore a market before I actually commit a larger investment to something. I want to make sure there's a real need there before I commit to a multi-million-dollar investment. So there's an exploratory recipe. And then we have a program recipe which is very similar to SAFe, where we have teams of teams, a set of teams building one particular solution. So these are starter recipes. And behind them is a diagram. And we don't have time in this presentation. Again, this could be an hour-long webinar, but suffice it to say, it's Scrum. It's Scrum, but more. It's like Scrum Plus. It reflects a more sophisticated project-based approach where, how do I get my requirements? Where do they come from? Well, maybe we need to do a bit of more upfront planning. If we're told we have to deliver something from 6 months from now, and we have to deliver on that date, maybe it's a change in a government regulation or a tax policy, it can't slip. It's got to be hidden on that date. Well, classic Agile says, well, we just sort of figure it out as we go. But we can't do that in this situation. So this is an example of pragmatism of Agile. And we say, we're going to use this life cycle, which is like a project-based life cycle. And we're going to spend some time up front in inception, planning and estimating and figuring out, make sure that we can actually get it done in 6 months. Which is not classic Agile. They don't like us to spend this time up front in something called a phase. But we're just pragmatic. If you need it, it's there. So folks, if you don't need the phases that you see at the bottom, then don't use them. But if you're in this kind of situation I described, this is a pragmatic approach for predictable delivery using Agile. So we have a phase for inception, we have a phase called construction, and going through a number of sprints here or iterations. And then when you have enough functionality, you deploy it to the business after that 6 months. And underneath it, you'll see we've got these milestones. This is a starter set of milestones, lean governance. It's not traditional governance, it's agile governance. And you can use them or you don't have to use them, but you don't have to invent the stuff yourself. Companies around the world are using these milestones. You can add your own in if you want, but it's good to start. You don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to figure it out yourselves. This is the agile project-based lifecycle. This is the lean project-based lifecycle. Very similar to the previous diagram. The difference in that it's like a 6-month project. But the difference is we don't bound things into 2-week mini projects. We just deliver it, we pull it, and maybe we prioritize the work differently. We prioritize the work by business value. Maybe there's things that need to be expedited, maybe things that need to be done by a certain delivery date, and intangibles, the different ways of prioritizing the work. So this is a lean approach, project-based. And I'm going to show you one more example, the continuous delivery. So this is what I sometimes call the Amazon model, the DevOps model, where you build and release, maybe many times a day, depending on what you're capable of doing. So this is the more of a product-based approach. Good to have choice. So one of the first things you do, folks, when you implement DA, it's not that hard. That's one thing I want to leave with you is, yes, the toolkit is extremely rich, just like the PMBOK is, but you don't use it all. It's like you just reference the bits that you need. And you can very simply start with Scrum. Take a DA Scrum Master class, you learn Scrum, start with the Agile lifecycle, which is Scrum. And then as you need different bits, you pull them in. This is a beautiful thing about it. You evolve. So it doesn't have to be complicated, folks. It can be very, very simple to implement DA. Take a course, start with Scrum as the Agile lifecycle, and then get better from there. And a lot of teams, by the way, start with Scrum and then they evolve to Lean. Nice to be able to do that because we're flexible. It's good. If you're quite happy with Scrum, you never have to change. This is I talked about the milestones and the lean governance. So I've talked about this already, so I'm going to move on. So it's kind of baked into Disciplined Agile, a starter set of governance. Where's this content that Mark talks about? Where's all these testing strategies and requirement strategies and estimating strategies? Well, they live behind goals. And we've organized the goals into the phases so it's easy to find them. And as an example, when you're just checking my time here, I'll be wrapping up soon and then we'll have some questions. When you form a team, we have decisions to make. How big is the team? How many teams do we need? What skills do they need? What roles will they have? Are they full-time dedicated to the project or are they sharing their time between multiple projects? Not a good strategy, by the way, but pragmatic. If that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do. Are they full-time employees? Or are they contractors? Or are they mixed? Are they co-located or are they distributed in different locations? You get the idea? This is why we used to call it a process decision framework, because we have all these decisions to make. And some of them are good, some answers are good and some are bad. And a lot of times people don't know the difference, but we give you that guidance to help you make better decisions. I'm going to take a look at one of the goals in particular, which is explore scope. Think of this as requirements. And this is what you see behind the scenes, is a goal diagram with the 44 or 42, I haven't counted them, different types of requirement strategies. Some of them are textual, some of them are diagrammatic. And if you see on the second, the purple boxes are called decision points. It's just a grouping of the different types. In the second category, explore usage, you'll see user stories, second from the bottom, and epics, and story maps. The ones that are bold, italicized, means that if you're going to do one from this particular category, then these are good ones to start with, default choices. You would never do all of these, never, ever, ever, ever. you would cherry pick the ones that make sense for you. But the bold italicized, if you want to pick one from this category, those are good ones to start with. If you see an arrow beside it, it means that it's an ordered list. That is to say, in these groupings, the ones at the top of the list are generally better choices, more agile than the ones at the bottom. You will see in the toolkit, not everything's agile. There are some non-agile techniques. Why? Because in some situations, it makes sense to do a less agile approach, depending on the type of project you're doing. If you're tendering a pipeline project out, as an example, to a company to deliver, a few sentences user stories is not going to do it. They cannot bid based on a few sentences of text. That's going to force you into a less agile way of writing requirements, and that's okay. So if you look at the very bottom of this diagram, level of detail of scope document. So you could have a detailed specification is what I just talked about. It's actually the second worst agile strategy, but in some situations like the one I just talked about, it may make sense for you. So we're pragmatic, we're not purist. Do what makes sense. Now, each of these goal diagrams are in the toolkit. And for each goal diagram, there is a table, which is why the book is so big. It's full of tables, just like that. And the tables have a definition of what each of these techniques are. Sometimes a reference where you can get more information. In this case, I see some references to Wikipedia. And on the right-hand side, where it might be useful technique for you to use. This is how we make better decisions. We're being given context-specific guidance to help you be more effective. As an example, you may discover personas, might not have even heard of them before, but they can help us build better user experiences. This is how we get better. This is why the toolkit is like a PMP of Agile. Okay, so producing business value. Really important point here is that we don't get successful by copying somebody else's method like Scrum or SAFe, but it can be a great place to start. It's a beginning, it's not a destination. So whatever you're doing, that's great, but you can get better. And folks, the companies that are successful are the ones that understand this and take responsibility for evolving their own agility. Spotify, the Swedish online music company, the people copy the way they do Agile. Don't do that. I mean, you can start that way, but the beauty of Spotify is not how they do Agile. By the way, they've changed over the years. They don't do what you think they do anymore. But the beauty is that they learn to customize their own way of working, and that's what we need to do. Let's talk about continuous improvement. This is how we get better. This is classic continuous improvement. Maybe I'm having an Agile retrospective to say, how can we get better? We identify problems where we're not getting the job done. We're not meeting our business expectations. So that's a problem. So you identify different techniques for how to get better. You try it over the next sprint. You know what, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, because you're just trying to figure things out. And it's sometimes called failing fast. Failing fast can be good because the quicker we fail, the quicker we learn, the quicker we get better. But failed process experiments are still a failure, and it can be time consuming and expensive. What if we could identify better choices for our situation so that when we try something, it's been proven already to work in our situation? The chances of you being successful are higher. And you can do that if you get a coach, an Agile coach, because they've been doing it for years, but they're expensive, they're hard to find. And what do you do when they're not around? I would suggest to you, what if everybody else in the team was kind of like a coach? They learned what's in the toolkit so they can sort of come up with these ideas themselves. This is how you have a really effective team. This is a high performance engine of a team. And that's what you get from the knowledge base in the Agile toolkit. And on the bottom right here, so this is where we kick it up from continuous improvement to guided continuous improvement. And the lesson here is that if you adopt a method like Scrum, you get better, but you tend to level off when you exhaust the small amount of guidance that they give you. And if you use continuous improvement, then you can sort of struggle and get better over time. But if you use guided continuous improvement, you can accelerate your learning by referencing the toolkit. And we're just getting close here to wrapping up, folks, for questions. And the important message is, again, it's not disruptive. You're not stopping what you're doing to do DA. You're doing awesome stuff already. You're just using the kit to get better. So start where you are, do the best that you can in the situation you face, and always strive to get better. That's kind of our motto. So what's happening moving forward in PMI? This is our new certification program, just released a few months ago, and I'm super excited about it. We, after we were acquired by PMI and became part of PMI family, what do we do with this existing Disciplined Agile certification program, and how does it fit with the ACP? And initially, I'll be honest, we kind of struggled with how we put the pieces together. And we came up with something called the Disciplined Agile Lean Scrum Master Certification, and we tried it. It's like the exploratory life cycle. We explored it and got feedback. We said, you know what, it's kind of right, but it's still confusing with our existing certifications. So we decided to scrap them and create a new program. And I'm so excited about this. And I can't take credit for this. This is our amazing certification team that did market research, and they asked hiring managers what they wanted in a certification, a rigorous, credible certification. And they came back to us and said, we want, the world thinks of Agile as Scrum, Agile leadership as Scrum. And so when they put hiring ads out there, they look for Scrum Masters. Even if they're using Lean, not Scrum, they still will ask for Scrum Masters because they know that Scrum Masters know Agile. So this is why our new certifications have a name of Scrum Master on them, Disciplined Agile Scrum Master. Those of you who know DA are saying, Mark and Scott, I thought you always were agnostic and you didn't want to use the term Scrum Master. You called it a team lead. Yes, true. In fact, even in the materials right now, we still refer to team lead, because if you're in a lean situation, you don't have a Scrum Master, you have a team lead. And if you're in a Scrum situation, the Scrum Master really is a team lead. But there's a difference between the material and the role name. And folks, you know, PMI, one of the reasons we live is to make your lives better, to give you, in the project management side, right, give you better learning opportunities, better certifications, to give you better career opportunities, job opportunities, and better compensation. This is designed to do the same thing on the Agile side. Our Scrum Master, our DA Scrum Master, is a better Scrum Master. It's more than Scrum. It's Scrum, it's Lean, and how to reference this toolkit. It is the world-class Scrum Master cert. And then the Senior Scrum Master is even better. Teaches you leadership ideas, teaches you how to lead multiple teams and to work with other areas of the organization. Hiring managers told us they want this certification. They got lots of Scrum Masters. There's like 1 million Scrum Masters out there. But you know, the bar is very low to become a Scrum Master. They want, for a serious Agile project, somebody who really has experience, knowledge, and can deliver. And that's what the Senior Scrum Master cert is all about. Okay, so you can go directly to the Senior Scrum Master. If you're doing Scrum somewhere, you can apply and take directly. You don't have to start at the DA Scrum Master. You can go directly to the Senior Scrum Master. Although if you don't have any DA knowledge, you would have to do a bit of homework before you went to the Senior Scrum Master class, which you can, the DA Scrum Master is the entry level. And by the way, there's virtual instructor-led versions of these, and we're coming up with on-demand versions as well. But the DA Scrum Master is available right now. It's being delivered as we speak around the world virtually. And you can find that by Googling Disciplined Agile training. You'll find the calendar. ACP is not going away. It's a great certification. The other certifications just layer in the toolkit to help you grow. And then the 2 certifications at the bottom, the coach and the value stream consultant, are more advanced certifications. So just like in PMI, you've got program manager, portfolio manager, you've got a place to grow. You got the same thing here in the Agile world. Unfortunately, I'm running out of time, don't have time to go in much more detail. I have done certification presentations in the past, and I'd be happy to come back and do one just on the certification if you like. Lastly, I just want to say that all the process blades here are not completely fleshed out. Like legal, we don't have any content behind it yet, but we're increasing the size of our thought leadership team, and we're also partnering with organizations that are specialists in these areas. So for instance, we will come out with a micro certification on marketing, where you would take the general course on the foundational layer to learn Agile mindset stuff, and then you would take 1 or 2 days of how to be Agile in marketing, and then you would get a micro cert called something like an Agile marketing specialist. So this will gives you other learning opportunities outside of IT. Okay, let's see, where am I here? And lastly, this is Flex, and don't have time to talk about it today, but think of flow. That's what the FL and Flex is about. It starts with the customer, it ends with the customer. Remember my Papa John's story? This is how you can use Flex with safe in large-scale delivery situations to remove bottlenecks and deliver more frequently. This is covered in the Value Stream Consultant course that will be released in the first quarter of next year. So in summary, success doesn't come from adopting a prescriptive framework or methodology, such as SAFe or Scrum, but it's a great place to start. For true business agility, we need to choose our own agile way of working, optimizing for our unique situation. DA is a rich, comprehensive, well-organized toolkit of strategies to help your organization be more successful with Agile. And it brings a disciplined, agnostic, professional, enterprise approach to Agile, which quite frankly is what our industry has been lacking in the past. So understanding what your options are and which ones work in different contexts leads to better decisions. For more information, there is a DA Basics online course, PMI/DA Basics. It's an e-learning course. It gives you a flavor for how DA works, but it's not a certification. I think it's $180 US. I think it's cheaper in the Middle East though, but it tells you kind of what introduces you to the DA toolkit, but it doesn't qualify for certification. That's available now. And I told you about the books. Go to pmi.org, find out more information. You can Google Disciplined Agile training to find training calendar. So that's it, folks. Thank you. I hope this has been useful. And how did I do? I still have, looks like 9 minutes for questions, and I'm happy to stay a bit longer if you'd like. Back to you.
Thanks, Mark, for the amazing presentation. And we have some questions from the attendees, if you allow me, please. People are asking, any experience of applying Disciplined Agile on applying it in oil and gas and construction industry?
Yes, yeah. We don't have any case studies, unfortunately, for it. But I've actually one of the very first sort of DA, we didn't call it DA at the time, we didn't have the name for it, but one of the first times I actually pulled these practices together on initiatives was working at a, so I live in, I think I mentioned, I live in oil country as well, in Alberta. We have the oil sands, which I think our reserves in the oil sands are comparable to Saudi Arabia's. But as you know, it's not politically correct these days. But we're in oil country as well, and we have a regulatory body here to preserve conservation and all those kinds of things. And it was called the Energy Utilities Board at the time. It's called something else now. So it was a regulatory board, so it really wasn't construction, but they used Disciplined Agile for all their projects. So if you're building, if you're doing construction, and you're going to be doing blueprints and plans and things, there are high fidelity types of plans with very detailed work breakdown structures, or in some areas, maybe you can get away with less detailed work breakdown structures, different ways of working. So yes, and the bottom line to that is that I think if you're in a construction project, you're not going to be using 100% Agile. I do believe that you will be using hybrid. There'll be a mixture of some upfront planning and maybe some Agile stuff as you go. I'll give you a simple example. And I also wanted, before I forget, leave you with this. We separately, PMI is working on lean construction initiative, which may end up being a certification. So it's not really DA, it's something different. It's more about lean and less about this word Agile. And that is underway. So you'll hear more about that coming. So that's the good answer, is there's going to be something specifically designed for construction. But I want to tell you a real quick story. In Canada, we're restoring our parliament buildings. It's a multi-billion-dollar project. The buildings were built before there was typewriters, a long time ago. So they've gutted the buildings. They moved our Senate and House of Commons out, and they're moving them back. It's very much a construction initiative done in a classic serial waterfall fashion, but they have a program office where all their project managers, they used to get together pre-COVID face-to-face around a whiteboard with sticky notes all over it. So they used Agile techniques combined with traditional techniques. So you can certainly do that.
It's wonderful.
So hybrid is probably the answer. Okay.
Thank you. Another question saying that what are the barriers we need to overcome to adopt Disciplined Agile approach in projects?
Yes. So The good news is it's very easy to start. As I said, if you're doing Scrum on a team, that you're basically doing Disciplined Agile, but probably not enough. The tricky thing is to get the business agility. You need the business to understand that applies everywhere, and it's not just IT. And I've got a couple of recommendations for you. One is there's the executive guide that we wrote. It's a smaller book, 200 pages. It's on Amazon. We'll be rebranding it to PMI, but we haven't done it yet. But it's 200 pages. It's really good because it's for executives, and it talks about what business agility really means. And there's a chapter in there, chapter 7, that talks about how you do transformations. Talks about how another chapter talks about communities of practice and center of excellence. The bottom line, it's important to have the executive buy into it. And that has made all the difference for me personally when I have done this with organizations as their coach. And I would like to send you to one particular place to answer this question. Go to pmi.org, go to Disciplined Agile, and look under, I think it's under resources. There's a menu called resources, and then an item called success stories, or maybe just Google PMI Disciplined Agile success stories. But anyway, it's on pmi.org. There's 2 interviews there that I ask you to watch. They're interviews with Sunil. One is with Mike Nettles, who was the COO of Papa John's when I was helping him, Mike Nettles. And the other one is Gary Eastwood from the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia. They're executives, CIOs, and one's the COO. Listen to their story, because they rave at what Disciplined Agile has done for them. So send an executive to those testimonials, and maybe that will help you convince them that you should get some Disciplined Agile training.
Wonderful. Thank you. Another question says, how does the project managers came into the role within Disciplined Agile?
Yeah. So Agile is just another style of project management. So anybody who tells you the project managers are going away really doesn't understand. In fact, I like to have PMPs actually as Scrum Masters on teams, because they already understand risk management and the need for governance. They just need to apply it a different way in Agile. So if I was a project manager and I'm a PMP, like a lot of you probably are, you got this great credential behind you for traditional projects, but increasingly organizations are looking for more agile approaches. You get a DA Scrum Master behind you, and you got the best of both worlds. You're extremely valuable, and you'll have the mindset, and you'll understand to adapt the agile way of working for your situation. Sometimes really agile, sometimes not so agile, but that's what you learn in DA. So I think both of them together is an amazing combination.
Perfect. Another question asking about the difference between Agile certifications. I know you touched that a little bit during your presentation, but if you can give like people asking for advice, which one I should go as a PMO office or PMO managers?
Yeah. So the problem, one of the initial slides I showed you showed you like 50 different practices, and there's the picture of myself and Scott and Al. And part of that message there is that if you want to learn how to deliver Agile end-to-end, unless you use the DA toolkit, you've got to read a dozen or more books. You've got to get a dozen or more certifications. It's really difficult because all these other certifications cover pieces, like a Scrum covers a piece, and a Lean Kanban course covers a piece, and Management 3.0. It's very, very expensive and takes a long, long time. You can just learn one toolkit. So we think that the DA certification is the most valuable certification in the world. And the world doesn't yet know that, but they will still soon learn it. So that is the certification that I would, if I was in a PMO, that's the certification I would want my teams to have. And I'm just going to remind you that the world doesn't really know about DA, and COVID hasn't helped. I was actually on a world tour when COVID hit. I was in Australia, and I was supposed to go to Singapore and Tokyo. I had to come directly home because of COVID. But with the 300 chapters and the DA champions that we have in the chapters, word is getting out there, and people are seeing the value. And you know what's going to happen, folks, is PMOs are going to start to demand that people on teams be certified in DA. Not just the project manager, but the entire team, frankly, should be certified, or at least trained. Certification is a separate thing, but everybody in the team should understand the toolkit, minimum the Scrum Master, but ideally everybody takes the course. Sorry.
Perfect. Okay. So actually, we have lots of questions here, and we are almost running out of time. So for like all the attendees, if you have any question, you can post it on our LinkedIn account under this webinar post. And I believe our PMI team and Mark himself, he can answer those questions whenever he's available. At the end, we would like to thank you, Mark, again for this valuable presentation. And also would like to thank our audience for joining us today. As PMI KSA chapter, we are obliged to share project management knowledge and global best practices to achieve our country's vision. And as all success story starts with vision, and successful vision are based on strong pillars. For that reason, we encourage all of our esteemed audience to join us during our regular events, and having also a PMI KSA membership, which will grant you an access to participate in our future events and activity with exclusive content only to our members. Thanks again, and have a wonderful evening. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Be safe.
Thank you, Mark.